recording as well. And we're on. Okay, we are recording and we are on streaming live. And my meters are bouncing around in green areas, so I think everything is good. So welcome. It's been a while, but welcome to First Page Feedback by Pat. So the way this works is every week I read the first page of, like it says, of a submitted work and give feedback on it. On slow weeks, I'll choose something from the public domain, but most of the time somebody will submit something, and there's a submission form on my website. That is pluther.us is the website, and you'll find the link to it. I'll also have the link to it in the chat or in the description of the, well, once this is on YouTube, I'll have the link in the comments there, or in the description there of the channel. Okay. So anyways, I give feedback on a first page. This is similar to what you would get in like an open read and critique session at a science fiction convention or a writer's conference, if you've ever been to either of those and taken place in an orc panel. That's how this works, except for it's just me giving feedback, it's only one page instead of doing a whole round table thing where everybody reads everybody's. As with everything, of course, take everything I say with a grain of salt. It's all my opinion. Hopefully will give both the author and the audience some insight of things to look at. Writing, like all art, of course, is highly subjective. And especially in the case of this type of feedback, bear in mind that I only see the first page. So I'll make guesses about where I expect it to go. I'll talk about my expectations. I'm going to talk quite a bit about them later here on this one. But sometimes, things are building up to something and I don't know anything about, and things that are very confusing on the first page may be cleared up on the second. I will point out where they are confusing on the first page. And if it's, if you didn't mean for it to be confusing at that point, then you might want to look at that. If you did, then hey, I go with it, because sometimes you do want to do that, right? You don't want to give all the information too quickly. Anyway, without further ado, here is my first page of My Depression and Me by Laine Alder. This is a work in progress, so she has not completed it yet. And it is not yet published, so this is the only place you can read it. And also it will be on my blog once this is finished. So let me start by reading the page. Let me start by taking a drink of water. Then I will read the page. Dear reader, you don't know me yet, but I've been here all along. I was in the corner of the lawyer's office when she was 8, crayons scattered, waiting for answers no one wanted to give her. I sat in the silence when she was 16, the truth uncoiling like a snake that had been hiding under her bed all those years. I curled myself around her at 19 when the world was too loud, too sharp, too much, and the only comfort was letting herself sink. I slipped back in at 22 when she tried to rewrite her story, whispering that she could never really outrun me. I clung harder at 24, reminding her that I was the only one who had never left. I am the shadow behind every photograph where her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. I am the weight that presses her chest flat in the middle of the night, even when she sleeps beside love. I am the reason she second-guesses every joy, every kiss, every dream that feels too good, because good things don't last, not while I'm here. You will meet the others too, denial with its soft lies, anger with its sharp edges, bargaining with its false promises, and the hollow silence of depression itself. But I am the one constant, the one who lingers when the party ends, when the door shuts, when the world turns quiet. People think they know me. They call me names. Shadow, darkness, illness. But I am more than that. I am the truth under the rug, the secret in the locked drawer. The voice that says, look closer, I've been here since the beginning, waiting for her to realize she was mine. So that is the first page. So, sorry, you could possibly hear my dog in the back. My housemate is there, though, so she can let him out. And I think the door's actually open, so he can go out on his own, too. So I'm going to go into talking about this. So it starts out and continues throughout the first page as apparently the personification of depression, speaking in first-person voice, which is an interesting choice. I like that, actually. So just starts off and this it continues that way through the whole first page. The first page, starting with the lawyer's office, I like to be tied to a specific event, without it saying it was caused by any specific event. You know what I mean? So it's there, but it's not necessarily those events aren't necessarily the cause of it. There were hints at the next several lines, but nothing specific like that. Oh, right. The very first one mentioned the specific event. The rest were more general times in her life, but they were not specific. So like the first one, lawyer's office when she was 8, crayons scattered, waiting for answers no one wanted to give her. But the others did not give specific locations or imagery like that, right? This is just, I sat in the silence when she was 16, but you don't know where or when or how. And again, 19, so a little more on the emotive instead of on the concrete like it was when she was 8. So it's a bit of a, it's interesting choice. So, and again at 22, when she tried to rewrite her story, which is an interesting hint at something that's going to be coming later. But again, these are, there's a mixture there of the concrete, crayon scattered, waiting for lawyer's office, crayon scattered. So things, places, and the rest were more generalized, right? The world was too loud, too sharp, too much, but there's no location, and there's no specific time or event of that. So is this something that just lasted that whole year? Did it come and go by years? Was there events where it's there, or was it just always there? So this is something that's a little unclear on so far. Let's see. Yeah, but it does. The only one who never left. There's a good ending to that. Reiterates how it may wax and wane, but never really goes away. Sorry. Let's see. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna put you on hold just for a minute to let the dog out because I'm not sure where my roommate's at. So I will be right back. And I'm going to mute. Do I have a mute button on this thing? Okay, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, and I'm back. Maybe I'll cut that part out on the actual video. And since nobody is watching me live, here we are. Okay. Where was I? Let's see. Okay. First full paragraph, yes. Okay, so the next paragraph 2. So the shadow behind every photograph, that part. Right? And the shadow behind every photograph where her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. Okay, now dog wants back in, so I'll be right back one more time. He's an older dog and he hasn't quite figured out the doggy door, so hold on. Okay, I'm back. Yes, so this part, I am the shadow behind every paragraph where her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. All of this. So again, that reiterates the whole idea of how it waxes and wands, never goes away. Sorry. So there's that. The next paragraph gets a little confusing. because it lists its related feelings, which is good, right? Because, okay, if we have personification of feelings, why limit it to the depression? So among them is the hollow silence of depression itself. Right? So here we have the related feelings. We have denial, anger, bargaining, and the hollow silence of depression itself, which is a little confusing because I thought that this was depression speaking. So if it's not, I'm not sure who we're actually hearing from here. The title, "My Depression in Me," implies otherwise, right? In the miscellaneous notes section. So on the submission form, there's a smart section for miscellaneous notes. The author does mention an alternative possible title of "Love Letters to a Dark Cloud." I like it a lot better. It seems more evocative, less generic. It's, I think, personally opinion, it's a better title. But either way, this is a little confusing about if it's depression speaking, so why does it suddenly refer to itself separately as in third person, right? As opposed to the first person it's been talking about the whole time. So it now, as I got to this point, it occurred to me that I'm only assuming that this is a memoir about depression. I'm assuming that from the title, because that's really all I have to go on at that point. There's no blurb, there's no cover, there's nothing else. Like all I got is the title, and whatever the submitter puts in the notes. Let's see. So I don't have a field for genre, so I'm just assuming it's a memoir. I think it is, and I'm 90% sure that my guess there is correct. But I have been wrong before. If it's not the personification of depression speaking, maybe it's something else, right? Maybe there's some kind of dark entity that's actually a separate thing attached to this person somehow, which would be a very different kind of story. Some kind of strange supernatural, I don't know, urban fantasy thing, maybe, or something else entirely. So let's talk a moment about set expectations and setting expectations, because an author should set expectations, right? You should try to do that. In general, and there are exceptions, there's always exceptions. Readers love it when you subvert their expectations, but they hate it when you disappoint their expectations. So let me talk a little bit about the difference there. Say your novel, on the cover, there's a man looking scared and there's a ghost looming behind him. Never having the ghost show up is going to disappoint readers. Like if you never address the ghost or anything about it, readers are going to be very disappointed about that. Same as if you have a memoir, but it doesn't, or if it looks like a memoir, but then it turns out it isn't. It depends how you handle that, I guess, because people could have, that could disappoint or subvert. But okay, let's go back to the ghost example. Got the ghost on the cover. If it never shows up, that's going to disappoint readers, and they're going to have a negative opinion about what might otherwise have been a really good novel. If you mention the ghost in the first paragraph too, again, and then never mention again, the people are going to be looking for that ghost for the rest of the book. And if it never shows up or never gets mentioned again, they're going to be disappointed. It could be trying to do something clever with that, but that would be very difficult to pull off. So again, expectations and, exceptions. Having a main character deal with the ghost in a haunted house, there you go. You're meeting, the characters in the haunted house, characters actually dealing with the ghost or expecting there to be a ghost. Or at least the ghost is addressed and you're meeting the expectations. So that's good. You should try to do that at least. Subverting the expectations is always even more fun sometimes. Maybe say in that case, the main character is slowly going mad and the ghosts he was talking to were all in his head and causing problems in his life because of it. That would be subverting the expectations, and again, could be a very good story. So in any of those three could be a good story. Some are easier to make into a good story than others. So right now, my expectation for this one is that we are hearing from the personification of depression. The reference to the hollow silence of depression itself seems to contradict that. but I'm not sure it does. So, or I'm not sure that's the author's intent. So whether my expectations are going to be subverted or disappointed or met remains to be seen, right? So we'll see that in later pages, which I don't have access to, and I have not read. So some specifics here. The world building. So we've got lawyer's office, crayons, references to under the bed, and photograph all seem to put it firmly in our modern world. Right? There's nothing that contradicts or adds unknown elements to our modern world. What was I? Sorry, I just removed the document on my page, so now I can't see it anymore. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, so I think that is our setting, is our modern world. Characters also neither at the extremes of being rich or poor, so socioeconomically they're somewhere middle class, right? If they were too far to the rich section, they wouldn't be at a lawyer's office, they'd be home. If they were too rich, the child would not be there with the mother at the lawyer's office, they would be home with the nanny. If they're too poor, they wouldn't be at a lawyer's office again because they could never afford a lawyer. And even probably time off work to go see a lawyer. It would be very difficult for them to get to a lawyer at all if you're too poor. Even though there are pro bono lawyers and public defenders and all that, but not sure if that's what kind of lawyer this is. So plotline, what does the main character want? That's always a good question to ask and to kind of set up, at least if you don't establish what the main character wants on the first page, it should at least establish what they're going to want. I mean, not what they're going to want, but at least establish that you're going to address what they want, right? If you get the difference there. What do they want? So the big questions, right, that any writer's conference always brings up, sorry, I keep hitting my mic by gesticulating too much here, is what do they want? What are they willing to do to get it? And what gets in their way? And that's the big things that create a plot. We don't really know any of this yet, except for the answer to the one might be clinical depression. I'm also getting the impression that we haven't heard from the main character. I think that's whoever she is, who we haven't heard from yet. If it turns out that the personification of depression is the main character, well, that could be interesting. I think it would be very hard to sustain that throughout an entire story, but it could be fascinating if pulled off well. I think, though, we're going to get more of a memoir about this woman's life, and her ongoing clinical depression and constant battles with it are going to be a constant theme throughout it. Exposition. So one of the things I look for on these is if there's too much irrelevant information in the wrong place, right? Which is what exposition is. It's not just, or at least too much exposition. If you do a giant info dump, and that's very common in beginning fantasy writers, to do huge info dumps to completely explain your world in the first page, which is never a good idea, or almost never. Just because if you give a whole lot of lists of names and events and, things like that, especially if they're made up fantasy word names and events and places, you're going to lose the reader there. The reader's not going to remember any of that. It's best to bring that up when it becomes relevant. Make sure at any given scene that the reader knows the information they need for that scene at that point. They don't have to know everything about the world before that. Let's see. Anyways, that's an aside. So that's not this one. This isn't a fantasy story, I'm almost positive. So is there too much exposition here? Not really. It's interesting because it kind of, in a way, is all exposition, but it's also a monologue from a specific character telling you about that character and, setting things up, which is what a first page should do, is, set up everything for the rest of the book. So where's the story going from here? My guess is from here is that, again, a memoir, possibly a pseudo memoir, which is written in the style of a memoir, but a fictional account. So I don't know if this is actually autobiographical or, complete fiction. But I'm guessing the former, but that's just a guess. Let's see. And it's going to be about a woman overcoming, or at least learning to live with, clinical depression, right? Just from the title, we kind of get that idea. How she does this, what hardships faces, what she learns, what kind of coping mechanisms she comes up with could all be interesting and are all likely to be included, is my assumptions here. The hints about hearing from the others. So the expectation that sets up for me is that what we're going to have is a lot of the memoir of her, interspersed with maybe a page or two at a time of exactly this kind of thing, where the others, who is we talked to, denial, anger, bargaining, all these. This would be fun to actually. I think would be a very interesting thing to hear from, a page or two by each of these, throughout, and they could possibly rotate through, but mostly it's probably going to be about depression because that's the title of the book. So that's from there. So I don't know. We'll find out. And the way this is set up kind of makes me want to. So that's good, right? If I picked up this book in a store and read this page, I would continue to the second page to see if, what happens there. See, what would I change? Well, if I was writing this, I'd want to make clear whether or not this was indeed the personification of depression speaking. If so, I'd take out the reference to depression as a separate thing. And if it's not, then have something early within the first paragraph or two, maybe, that makes it more clear. If it turns out there are supernatural elements, I'd want to hint at that, possibly, or save them for the second page, possibly a back blurb, but don't depend on anybody reading your back blurb. I have a book about werewolves. Werewolves are mentioned in the first paragraph on the back. I still get reviewers and emails from people who are shocked to learn there are werewolves in the story. So don't depend on people knowing anything beyond the title, and maybe not even that. Let's see. And really, that's about it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. So I just got back from the last Oricon. And if you're one of the people who I met there and you decide to follow me, thank you. Hello. Let's see. I don't have any submissions yet for next week. So if you'd like your first page read and feedback and link to your socials and so forth, then go ahead and see the submission form on my website, which will be linked below, just right down there in the comment section. And at some point in the next couple of days, I hope to get back also into my first playthrough of The Last of Us and go straight through to the end of it, which is that's the other thing I do on this YouTube channel, is I play video games and talk about the writing therein. I did a complete run through of Dragon Age, the first one, Dragon Age Origin, and then I started The Last of Us. I've taken a break from it for a few months, but I hope to get back into it possibly tomorrow or the next day, and continue going through the end once or twice a week. And then after that, probably I'll go to Life is Strange Before the Storm, which is one of my favorite games, and it turns out has some very similar thematic elements to The Last of Us, even though it's a very different style of game. So hope to see you around and enjoy, and thank you very much, and especially thanks to Laine for submitting this week's first page feedback. Thank you very much. Goodbye.